a quick update in terms of your protocols, who's been leading the meetings, and where did the working group end last time, and what's the next step that we should be taking at this meeting?
Yeah. I'm happy to give you a recap. So essentially, what we've been discussing is kind of a consistency in terms of the formatting of the actual document itself. Also, updating language to be reflective of the times that we're in now, and also forward-looking language. So I think we mentioned even when we were at the last meeting last week that some of the pronoun usage, we were looking into that, what was best practice for he, she, they, that type of thing. And then also considering wherever possible to either eliminate copy that was wasn't as direct or didn't really explain something very well, and replacing it with something else. So for example, something that I notated was, we have information here about excise, division of excise, which is typically for a liquor license, but that's not
Mhm.
really spelled out.
Right.
So, wherever possible, either truncating content or simplifying and explaining
Yeah.
verbiage. And then we also noticed that something that was kind of missing was definitions of commonly used terms. Now, some sections do have that, but not all. And
Uh-huh.
so just making this a more user-friendly, if you would,
Mhm.
guide, as opposed to kind of a piece of content that is or a piece of legislation, I guess, that isn't really easily understood or easily accessible to the public.
Well, I think that those are all valid concerns, and I think run across all the working groups in terms of items. I know in item two, we had discussed, in working group two, we had discussed some similar needs in the first meeting. And I think that one of the questions that we might want to raise in the larger commission meeting, and Councillor Hamilton, you may have a response to this too, is how we create that consistency across the entire charter document,
Mhm.
because it
Mhm.
doesn't, my own personal feeling is it doesn't make much sense for each of the working groups to be kind of, doing their own language and revisions at that point. The document needs to speak consistently across the entire document, and the same person or the same persons need to be actually composing it so that there is a consistency to the document. I know that at one point, and I think I saw an email coming across, Councillor Hamilton, maybe from you, about you were doing some review of whether it was possible to develop some language for the ballot, and ways to be able to make some non-material changes in the document without having to make each one of them and vote. I was kind of curious about where that discussion might be at this point.
Yeah, that's something I'm gonna get to you guys this week, but my recommendation really would be, um, um, well, hello to Madam Chair, and
I
we're talking about the consistency in language right now. And Commissioner Crosland asked me if I had any recommendation on how we get that uniformity. And my recommendation might be that we add that as an agenda item so that everybody can kind of come to one meeting and say, here are all the things we think could be done with consistency. Or we try to kind of gather those things, because work group 3 has reported out on several consistency items as far as what topics are going to be covered in each section, and gender neutrality, maybe the removal of pronouns entirely, but other people may have other things, right? So my suggestion would be that the group come together and talk about all of their suggestions so that we're all on the same page about what those might be and what we're going to accept or reject, and then move forward from there so that we're all on the same page, instead of having each work group report out or assigning it to a particular work group that particular organization and consistency and things like that, but having everybody come together and say what's come out of their work group. Maybe you discuss it in the work groups and then bring it to the bigger meeting or something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like that concept. And I also think that that will allow us to then move into other pieces. For example, I know obviously we handle the executive and legislative piece of the charter. At least those are the articles that we're supposed to be focusing on. And so I'd like to get into more of the meat of the matter, if you will, in terms of, there are some recommendations. Obviously, I looked through the binder and also through other charters and revisions, even those regionally, like the St. Louis County Charter. And there are just some things that I've noticed in terms of how to make a city even better. And so, I'd like to explore those as much and as thoroughly as possible versus some of the common things that we're hearing through all work groups, which is the consistency in language. Like that's something that we can just unilaterally maybe update once we get the go ahead to do that, and once we have buy-in from everyone. But for example, even bringing up things like um, a different appointment of a new position, like city manager and things like that. I'd really like for us to explore, or at least have the opportunity to explore other additions or other offices that might be helpful to make the city run as smoothly as possible.
That sounds really helpful. I sense that there's a concern on the part of commissioners, as there should be, that we're going to run out of time because we've got a shortened timeline, and I really am grateful that we have an extension now up until the March meeting. But really, that means that we've only got maybe 4 working sessions in January and February to compress a lot of information into that, and interviews. And I know that at least in working group 2, one of the things that was really beneficial to us was to start an interview process with some of the people who were directly related to the particular articles that we were what we did was we created buckets. And so in our case, we had 3 buckets. I think it was elections, Board of Aldermen, and taxes. And if we were to look at that way, then we have mayor, and we have personnel, and we have miscellaneous. And then we decided, we allocated time to each one of those groups, depending on which ones we thought would take more interviews, etc. And then we asked our liaison, in this case, Councillor Hamilton, to set up some appointments, because it's really going to, if we only have 4 meetings in January and February, plus perhaps the meeting at the end of this month, depending on availability. And I think only of the, for instance, mayor's department, the mayor and departments, we're talking a lot of departments there. And so one of the questions we might want to have is, do we want to do some group interviews? Do we want to do some individual interviews? What we found was really helpful about actually talking with some of the elected officials and employees was that that they actually had some perspectives on certain issues that caused us to sort of say, oh yeah, well, what about? And then that added to additional kinds of issues that we hadn't even explored already. So and the ability to be able to have an interview with them and a back and forth that allowed for questions and responses was so much better than a written report that you had to kind of, read through and then interpret. And then, oh, there's a question. Well, then you have to go back and ask again. So being able to talk with people, and I would suggest that maybe the first one we want to tackle is the mayor, the article on the mayors, etc. Because it is such a large and somewhat unwieldy unit that we want to identify how we want to do that and who we want to talk with, so that we can give the opportunity then to Councillor Hamilton to make the contact and be able to book those appointments as soon as possible.
If I may, can I add to the discussion? Secretary Bobo, I completely agree that I would like us to move forward into truly progressing through the articles that we have versus this continued concentration on administrative coordinating kind of a task. We've already decided as a commission that we're going to put those things on the agenda and address those things at the public meetings. I think the work group's concentration on the actual articles we were assigned is truly the best approach of time and use of time. As with this time, I have a hard stop at 2 o'clock for another meeting in which I'm required to be at. But when I joined, Commissioner Hamilton was talking to the framework that we have discussed in public meetings previously. In our work group folder, digital document, I've already created what we spoke to several work groups back in may have been October, pertaining to structural sections of the articles. I can present, or we can have Commissioner Hamilton's part-time commission staff, if we can have that added to the bundle for this month related to the agenda. And I'll just do the updates to the agenda to reference that. And we can kind of discuss it at the public meeting and proceed beyond it. But I'm with Secretary Bobo, the belaboring of that discussion or continued discussions, I don't think is necessary, but we can review it at the public meeting and kind of see how we want to proceed with consistency related to the framework of the article.
So to touch on Commissioner Crossland's point, are we maybe in alignment that we should be coming up with a list of names that we can perhaps meet with over the next several weeks so that we can have those people come to either these calls, or we can set up separate calls so that we can just learn from those individuals? It sounds like that was a fruitful conversation.
I don't have an issue with meeting with anyone. I think for me, I would like document. I'm an academic, so I would like documentation in addition to, or regardless of whether we get an interview or not. As we heard from some of our other commissioners, some people are unable to meet or to have interviews and discussions. And we can't obviously mandate them or require them. We can ask for interviews, we can ask for discussion. I think the mayor's office and the mayor herself, or the mayor, whomever is sitting in the seat at this point, which isn't her, if we can have her to agree to an interview with us, and the director of personnel, and whom else is on our miscellaneous articles. I believe those two persons specifically, if we can, Commissioner Hamilton, request for them to do an interview with us. I would still recommend a documented report from the departments that our articles are reflective of, because I would like to see the documentation. I understand commissioners' requests. I too am a commissioner. I would request the documents because if we have to draft a written document, and in drafting our written document, I would prefer to be able to reference written statements from departments, officials, divisions, as well as the interview perspective. So in research format, we tend to do both written and interview.
Would we, for their for our benefit, because we're talking a lot of reports then that we have to sift through as well, and for them to report, could we be somewhat specific in terms of what pieces of information or information we're requesting in writing, so that we get some consistency out of that information, and
it would be the same when we interview them. We're going to have, or we should have had in our work groups to date, we've had pretty consistent questions for the persons that we've interviewed. And as a work group, we can determine what those questions would be. What my purview of talking to the departments and officials is really just to get a gist of their perspective on the article that's written that reflects their department. So I'm also entrepreneurial. So I'm very open to what their perspective of what the article pertaining to their department is. So if they can be given a link, which it's on public information, the charter is, if they can be given a link to the article that reflects their department or division or position, and simply have an open, candid conversation about what their perspective is, what their opinion is, how the charter for their area of work impacts or affects them. And really it just be kind of a flowing conversation pertaining to that. Most people that I've spoken to, they have a general understanding of how the charter impacts their day-to-day work. And I haven't had to have any scripted means of what they should say or shouldn't say, or what my interest is. It's really about their perspective and what they want to lend to us.
I think you're absolutely right that that asking them how the charter impacts them, how their article impacts them is important. One of the additional pieces of information, though, that we have found to be very useful out of the interviews is to ask them how the charter in general has impacted them, not just their particular article, because there are so many relationships, as we've found, and you were talking about it, in fact, at the last commission meeting. There are so many relationships between and not even visible relationships, immediately invisible relationships, that asking them to point out other places in which the charter affects them and may bear some looking at is useful to us as commissioners in the whole, not just within our working group.
So just to clarify, I'm just making some notes here. We're wanting to start with the mayor's office and then the personnel director. And the questions would be, how does your article impact you, and how other portions of the charter impact your office or department? And then your perspective, this is sort of the same question, but putting them together, your perspective on how the article related to your office impacts you and how other portions of the charter impact you or your department is how I would probably frame the question. Does that sound like it's bring both of your thoughts here? And so would you want to like have them in and then have them commit to writing afterwards the takeaways that they want to have from that discussion? Is that?
I think if we do the interview, I know how to transcribe and summarize and create a document for myself related to the documented draft that our work group has to present. So I can just translate or transcribe the interview once it's done so that it's in written format.
Okay, and I'm sharing my screen so that you can see all the
departments.
Yeah, let me try to focus in on it because it may not be being like big enough. So hold on one second.
I think it was half of my screen when it popped up. How about you guys?
It was large enough for me.
Yeah, it was big enough. I'm on my laptop, not on my phone, and so I'm okay. I can see it.
Okay, I'm gonna try to blow it. Here we go. I'm putting it in a PDF now so that I can blow it up a little bit for you guys.
Great.
Okay, because well, in addition to the mayor and the personnel, as I look at these, we're really talking we're talking the city courts also, and the law department. How would you suggest, Councilor Hamilton, how would you suggest we address the issue of an interview with the counselor's office, since you are the lead staff person on this committee?
You could just ask.
Well, would you like to do it that way? I guess that's I just want to make sure that you'd like to do it that way.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm happy to give feedback on the question, the sort of dual question, how the article impacts you and how other portions of the article impact you. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Who would be the point of contact for the register?
The city register herself, would be the person. So
We
I
have,
have order being mayor's office and then personnel director. Do we want to add register after her?
yes, and then so if we could, Commissioner Hamilton, I'm trying to call you Shayna. If we could have an individual that represents each of the articles, so we have city officers and employees, would that be the director of personnel?
I think the director of personnel will fall under civil service, and so would the
Yeah.
civil service commission.
8.
So
Who would be the personnel for, or the person of point of contact for the city officers and employees?
Well, does that fall under the mayor?
No.
let me look at it really quick.
There may be some departments. I guess the thing that I'm not sure of here, and maybe it'll come out of the interview with the mayor's office, is that there may be particular department heads that we'll want to have a discussion with.
A lot of these, the oath of office, so I'm looking at the sections of city officers and employees. Appointments made by the mayor is the first section. The residency requirement, which we know is preempted, right?
Yeah.
The oath of office is administered by the register. Official bond, and when that's the comptroller's office deals with the bonds. Liability of department heads for subordinates, that's probably me. So salaries, this is all personnel or something. So most of the people who you are already going to talk to will have to do with this, except for the bond, it seems like.
Correct. So then we can get the city, I'm sorry, I'm putting my finger over the camera. Can we get the city marshal?
Okay, so that'll be a little bit different, but we can get someone. So right now, we don't really have a city marshal. We have the marshal services kind of reports up through SLMPD. So but I will figure out who a representative is for city.
Well, an eminent domain is going to fall within the building section, right?
No, I don't. I mean, that would be me, I think.
Is that you? Okay. Oh, but the building department falls within the mayor. Is that what happens?
The building division is probably under public safety. It is under public safety. Like the building commissioner reports to the director of the Department of Public Safety.
Okay, are we able to get the Department of Public Safety? Or at least
I just don't know that any of these have to do
with any of those.
With the building division. But
what might make sense at this point would be, as we initially discussed, that we start with the mayor and the personnel director, and we set aside I don't know, 30 minutes for each of them. And then based on our discussion with the mayor, we may want to identify some departments and divisions that we follow up with within that segment. But in the meantime, then Councillor Hamilton can go ahead and begin to book some of these other heads of articles so that we could have them follow up, maybe 2 to a meeting.
I like that.
I think that all of the individuals that are representatives of the article should be sent an invitation pertaining to interview. If we could do that, because they are not going to all respond at the same time for the same work group. But if because we're already, in my purview, a little behind the time frame and time curve, and we want to give people enough notice to schedule out as far as they need to, or come as quick as they can. So if we could invite everyone to schedule an interview over the next month or 2 months, that includes everyone involved. So we already have Commissioner Hamilton here, so it's technically we could give her the next 30 minutes to do her interview section, but everyone else, I believe it's 4 other individuals that we would need to interview. Commissioner Hamilton?
So you may decide, I mean, that's why you should really decide who you want to talk to, right? Because when you say who represents, so the civil service, for example, is an article. It
Yeah.
deals with the director of the Department of Personnel's duties and responsibilities. It also deals with the Civil Service Commission. You may decide, hey, we want to talk to the personnel director first. We want to talk to the commission first. We want to talk to both of those people in the same meeting. Or, you know, or we don't want to invite the Civil Service Commission. We just want to talk to the personnel director, see where that goes.
I
And
would
then
like to see
maybe we want to talk to the Civil Service Commission because we see that the director of the Department of Personnel is the secretary for the commission, so maybe able to speak to that. You know what I mean?
I would like to see the departments that are, or the articles that are impacted by a collective, because I'm finding structurally, there's a lot of separation where there probably could be some unison. If the articles or the departments or staff that work together on the same work could be in the same interview, I think that would help us a lot with gaining just a total transparent look on a particular department or particular article without
I
having
think-
them
yeah,
separated.
there's opportunities in that. There may also be negatives to it. If in fact it's the other half of whatever the unit is that is the block, it may be creating blockage or something like that. We had the Democratic and the Republican election commissioners meet at the same time, and that worked out fine. They both worked together regularly on different kinds of projects and were able to help us a lot in terms of that learning process. But I think we would have to seek some guidance about whether some of these are necessarily compatible dual meetings.
Well, Commissioner Hamilton, can you answer or speak to that? Would there be any conflict with any of the departments or officials that are clearly working together in a department meeting or interviewing with us together?
I would not presume to make a generalization about people.
Yeah.
That's not something I can answer for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like,
I don't
it's not to know, right.
see that being
Yeah.
a concern. Just like you said, the
but I will
Democratic Party and
say,
the Republican Party met together. It was
Yeah.
what I
I
will
could
say
see how
is-
that would be an issue, though. I don't think that that's worth, I think it's worth consideration.
Yeah.
What I will say is that the register and the mayor work together frequently, so that seems like a natural pairing.
Mhm.
The law department and the city court work together often, so that seems like a natural pairing. And I would hear from the director of the Department of Personnel first, and then
Yeah.
determine whether you believe you need to hear from the
Civil
civil
service
service
or not.
commissioners who are, that's a body of individuals who are not city employees, right? So you may decide that you want to hear from them or not. So I
Yeah.
think for purposes of our, I can reach out to the mayor's office and the register to try to get them in the same meeting. I will reach out to the courts and try to pair a time of mine that works with them. And what was the last one that I said? Oh, and the personnel director I will set up as well. And then you may just leave the other 30 minutes to talk about what you've learned and where you go from here and stuff like that. So.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
because I'm especially interested in, once we've had the meeting with the mayor, considering whether there might be certain departments that we would want to follow up with,
Mhm.
because they are large and may be more impactful directly on the public than others.
Agreed.
I'm interested in hearing the public's feedback on these articles or their departments and officials. Not more than hearing from the persons working in these spaces, but I'm far more interested in hearing how these departments or what the public's opinion or perspective is on these departments. So Commissioner Hamilton, we voted on an email campaign to be started for community engagement related to each work group or the commission's work as a whole. And I would be more interested in scheduling interviews with people that have vested interest in these areas or these departments so that we could also hear their feedback. I think there's a great focus on hearing the perspective of everyone that works in these departments and these spaces, but we have to start working at engaging the public in the discussions. So maybe we do 30 minutes with the departments, officials, and divisions, and then that other half be dedicated to the public's perspective or opinion on an interview that we had. So for example, maybe the mayor does the first 30 minutes of the work group's interview time. In the next 30 minutes, we've invited some public to have an opinion on what her feedback was or what her perspective was, versus it continuing to not include the public in perspective.
That's certainly one way that we could do it. I wonder whether we could incorporate that second half into the feedback mechanism of the meeting on January the 23rd, when we would have not just the feedback of the mayor, but the personnel and others, and also other work groups, so that the public who might have an interest in providing feedback on one particular aspect of government or another will have the opportunity to kind of do it inclusively there. You know, my own feeling is that that the work groups themselves are times for us to learn something about these areas, so that we can better convey the guts of what we've learned to the public, so that they can respond more broadly and accurately to that information.
I agree with that. I think that since we have time allotted and also voted on a specific set apart time to hear from the public, that would probably be the appropriate best avenue to do that. And certainly in the meantime, we can, take public feedback into consideration, whether that's via email or other methods as we move forward. I think it's important just to hear from these department leaders, so that we kind of understand within the context of what we're being asked to do and how to make those updates and arrangements. But again, since we did vote on a specific time set apart to really hear from the public, I'd rather do it that way and really focus on, these 30-minute sections and these 30-minute interviews to hear from those who are named in these articles. So the public definitely has to have a say, and I think that we've set apart time for that as well.
What time? I believe that the discussion that we had, where we discussed that the public would be involved in the work groups. These meetings were made public for the public to be able to be involved in each work group. And what I'm hearing now is that we did not vote for it to only occur in public meeting or public hearing. We agreed that we wanted to engage the community throughout the process.
And I think that's actually set up and
consensus of.
happening. Yeah, I think that's actually set up and happening from the
Mhm.
point of view that the work groups are being recorded. I've spoken with a couple of people recently, in fact, who've actually listened to the recordings. And so that's one way in which they can be gaining knowledge of what's happening. They also have the opportunity, I believe, to actually be able to participate in the work group process by letting us know in advance. Or can they use, Councillor Hamilton, you could answer this question because I certainly do, but are they able to participate by adding questions to the chat or do anything like that if they're listening in on the meeting, for instance, right now, or what?
I'm not sure. There is a Q&A function here, so it might allow that. But here's what I will say about what we voted on. I think we voted to take public comment at every regular in-person meeting and to hold 3 public hearings for public comment. The other work groups have I think one of the 3 has taken some public comments during their work group meeting. I don't know that they formally set aside time to do it, but like you will see that we have a member of the public and on our attendee list right here. And so what you would have to do is either allow them to talk or make them a panelist or something like that in order to do that. So it is possible
that if they're here, we should. Okay,
well,
just
to finish the thought, I don't think that we have voted that there would be public comment at working groups. However, it is possible, and at least one work group I know of has taken some public comment during their work group. So I just wanted to say that.
Mhm.
Thank you. I think that if any member of the public is present for any of our meetings pertaining to this work, that they should be able to be permitted. We also voted on the public comment form that could be used and submitted. And we voted for these meetings to be public, for the public to be able to attend. So for example, if we schedule the mayor to attend the work group meeting for the next work group, and there are 10 or 15 public members that have insider input or perspective or questions or whomever during this work group, I think it is also an appropriate time for those questions to be asked, or for us to know what they are, in addition to the public meeting and public hearing forums. We've added the work groups for this purpose, for the public to be involved in the process throughout it.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings one way or another about it. I'm for as much public comment as possible because it is really important that we get their input as the people who live day to day with, in our community, trying to be able to negotiate the labyrinth of the charter the way the people who work there do. And so I'm wholeheartedly behind that. But I also realized that in terms of the working groups themselves, and at least what I thought the charge was, it was about us finding out more about, what parts of the charter do and don't work. And to me, when I thought of public, I think of two aspects of public. One is particularly going to be on show, if we want to call it that, on the 23rd of January, and that is the general public and individuals who may have questions, etc., for whom there's an importance of being able to enable them to speak and to incorporate the parts of what they say that are relevant into our thoughts and documents. The second group, and there has been some talk about this, but we haven't really settled on a direction or how to be able to do it, are organizations that work in the community, generally non-profit, non-governmental organizations that are focused on various aspects of good government and city operations, etc., that have knowledge at this point and would benefit us learning from as part of our working group analysis. And what I would really support as part of this, rather than taking public comment right now, which I go back to this whole thing of January the 23rd, I would really support our being able to identify whether there are organizations that relate to our articles that we might be able to invite the leadership or a representative of to also do an interview with the way we are interviewing city employees. And because we want to learn from them.
Commissioner Hamilton, I have a document here that I have outlined related to organizations that could speak to the commission, because I recognize from the November meeting, there's a bit of a learning curve that needs to occur for the commission as a whole, pertaining to what Commissioner Crossland just stated. I'm gonna send the document list to you and have it also added to the bundle, so that some of the organizations that could come and speak to the commission during work groups or during our public meetings, like on that special meeting structure that we voted on in October, if we can have some of those organizations to come and speak to the total city government structure, the processes and procedures and all the things associated to it, because they do that work. So I think I pulled about 12 organizations. And again, in addition to scheduling the interviews, if we can reach out to those organizations and have some of them to schedule presentations for our special meeting setup, and the commissioners that can attend, just like we did when Dr. Ness was invited. So I'm gonna look at my list now and see which like to give you guys some examples of the organizations that I pulled. Some of those organizations are
While you're pulling that up,
National
just to,
Civic League is one of them.
okay. Do you have the full list?
Yes.
All right.
So
Okay.
the full list looks like National Civic League. It looks like ICMA. It looks like National Association of Counties. It looks like Council of State Governments. And those are the primary four.
So those are organizations that have experience in the structural side of government and what from their point of view works and doesn't work. I was thinking more of organizations that that may have constituents, organizational and business constituents, etc., that may be impacted by the charter, have had difficulty or have recommendations with regards to the charter. And so I was thinking a little bit more of maybe, I don't know, Greater St. Louis or one of the entrepreneurial organizations that works with startups or human services related organizations, whatever. I was thinking of organizations like that, or even the young woman who spoke the one night about transportation and the needs and the knowledge that she had to offer about transportation, which I think would fall within, I don't know, streets or something within the mayor's office. But I know that her report was appended in the last meeting anyway, and so it's there.
Have you, Commissioner Crossland, put together a list of these organizations?
So what
Yeah.
my office is doing as a result of the December meeting that was just had is trying to come up with community organizations, which is what you all asked. And once we have that, I think we're going to share it with the group broader and ask you to add people. That was the ask during the last meeting, right? David Dwight said, I have people, and so my office is trying to put together what we have based on who puts events on the city's calendar and things like that. And then the request at the last meeting was that be shared with the commission so that the commission could then add names as well, right? And so that is what my office is doing based on you all's directives and directions at the
Right, and we could extract a few organizations from that list that might be directly relevant to our articles and ask them then to do interviews as part of this process.
Commissioner Hamilton, could you add to the list the national organizations that I listed so that we could identify if they have availability to do a special meeting for the commission?
Okay. Do you want to send it to maybe the Charter Commission email or put it in the work group drive or something like that?
I'm going to do that now.
Okay.
So I guess what I'm hearing, just to summarize up to this point, next steps are going to include us having at least 30 minutes of an ask set out to some of these department leaders. I think Councilor Hamilton, you mentioned at least 3 groups that we would be meeting with immediately. So the mayor's office, your office, and others. So is that something you'll be able to set up for us within the next couple? Okay, great.
So what I will do is you've got 3 sort of sets of groups of people that you've identified. The mayor's office and the registers is the first group. The city courts and the city councilor's office is the second group. And then the personnel director kind of standalone right now. And if you want to put somebody with that, we can. But I can reach out to each of those to see what their availability is for the next 3 work group meetings that we have and get back with you on that.
That sounds really great. My only question, I guess, at this point is whether we should actually have the register with the mayor or not, or whether we should have the mayor on her own. We did President Green on her own, and I would assume that if they get Comptroller Green, she'll be on her own also, because you want that person to do a global kind of a response to the questions, etc. And they may feel that if there are certain employees or reports there, etc., that it might curb how they say certain things. I don't know.
Well,
I'm
I would be reaching
yeah.
out to the principal of each of these departments
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
asking them to come or send a representative.
Yeah.
As opposed to like the whole office, right? You know what I mean?
Right,
Is that
right.
what,
No, no.
is that better or?
Oh, no, no. I'm just saying that in addition to the mayor, I wasn't sure whether we should have the register at that meeting or whether we should do the register in another grouping.
Oh, okay. We can do that. We can do the register with the personnel director. How about that?
That would be
That's
great.
great.
Yeah, that
Okay.
would be good.
I think
Okay,
that works
got
fine.
Okay.
I will reach out to those folks or have the staff to work on that.
Great. My other question, just before I forget it, has to do with next meeting. I think we're scheduled for a meeting between Christmas and New Year's, and are people going to be available to be able to do that meeting?
I
What's the
will make
date of the
myself
meeting?
available.
Mhm.
What's the date of the meeting, Commissioner Hamilton?
I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but
Maybe the 28th.
Yep, my birthday.
Yeah.
On your birthday,
Yes.
Secretary Bobo, I do nothing on my birthday.
This is important to me, so I will be available. I'll make myself available.
We appreciate it completely.
Well,
so the next meeting is December 27th.
Oh, 27th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
20
I'm
well, it's not your
available. I'll
birthday
be
then.
fine.
I want to make, I came into this work group late, and so I'd actually blocked time for a Thursday meeting. And so
Oh, right.
I'm kind of trying to move things around as I go.
Mhm.
The 27th, I can make that work. I can move one thing and I can make it. And 1:00 then is a good time for all of you. Is that correct?
It is for me. I can
Mhm.
be malleable on a little bit more on Wednesday mornings up until around 2:00 because I do have a
Mhm.
standing meeting at work. But if that's typically where
No,
the time we
I
should
can
be.
make 1:00 work. We were doing 1:30 on Thursdays, but
Right, I remember. Yep.
yeah,
Okay.
but I can certainly make 1:00 work. It's a little tighter, but I can make it work.
Okay.
And Chair Nolan Eccles, there were a couple of things you asked me to add to the bundle, but I'm gonna have to call you about that to make sure I understand what
No problem.
you were.
I'm sending you the email you requested now. And we can talk offline about the additional documents.
Okay.
Okay. And are we to assume that we might have individuals to interview at that meeting on the 27th, or are we going to aim for after the beginning of the year?
I will let you know as soon as I know.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Commissioner Hamilton. We appreciate it.
Yes.
Don't forget to schedule your interview, Commissioner
Yeah.
Hamilton.
Oh, that's it. All else fails, we can do that one first, right? On the 27th.
Yes, if all else fails, we can do Commissioner Hamilton first and everyone else to follow. Okay, here we go. Was there anything in addition you guys wanted to discuss while do we have someone also present for public comment, Commissioner Hamilton?
We have an attendee in the audience, but I don't believe they have requested to speak.
A few moments.
I have Victoria Turner here. If you would like to speak, just send up the.
If we could, to see if she has anything to add to what we've discussed today.
And I probably shouldn't have called them out like that. I think what we'll probably say if what I would recommend going forward is that if we want to set aside time for public comment, that we have the agenda reflect that, and that we tell attendees that they can use the raise hand function if they would like to be allowed to speak.
That would be perfect. Yeah.
Is it on, I believe, it's one of my colleagues printed the agenda. Is it on the agenda that I create? Because all the work groups, do they have agendas?
Not necessarily.
Yeah, so I don't think, because it wasn't a formality that we had agendas for
Mhm.
work groups.
Yeah.
I did one for.
We do. We have agendas on our website for each of the work groups because it's a public meeting. We're required to notice it to the public. So that's what I was showing on the screen a little bit earlier.
Okay, so if we could add the public comment like it is on the public meeting for at the end of the agenda, and I think we could all have a consistent structure as we do for public meetings to add or ask for requests or allow public comment to follow your forum, Commissioner Hamilton.
Okay.
Also, I'm seeing the answer from the attendee that,
Yeah.
okay.
Our attendee does not have a comment today.
Okay.
Well, thank you, attendee, for coming. We appreciate you coming and listening.
Okay, ladies, if there's nothing else, I think we could adjourn our work group meeting, and then we'll see you guys the day before Secretary Bobo's birthday.
And Merry Christmas to all. And to
All of you, yes, and happy
Happy
holidays.
holidays.
Yes.
All right.
Hi, everybody.
Bye-bye.